I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to The Conversation with Al McFarlane. Today is Thursday, October 27th, 2022. I'm glad to be here and glad to have you along. We call this Thursday program The Companions, and I'll tell you why. I've become a fan of Irma, the Ghanaian writer who's written prolifically on how do we reimagine, discover what he calls, I think, an Afrocentric or Africana way of knowing, of living, of being. How do we escape the structure of both patriarchy and white, I used to say supremacy, but one of our guests described it as white savagery. I like that. How do we escape the matrix of domination, the twin evils, our guests called it, of patriarchy and white savagery? And how do we imagine ways we can be together, not only for our present development, growth, sharing, being, loving, but in a way that is intergenerational, that looks backwards to before the systems of hierarchy and oppression existed, and that looks forward to what we can create together with the knowledge and the intuition and the capacity to innovate and to create, to co-author futures that work for us and for humanity. Well, so on Thursdays, I have friends, companions who I think are people that are walking down the same path, looking for the same fulfillment for humanity. Let me start by saying hi to who's here so far. My regular writing colleague and childhood friend, Brenda Lyle-Gray. Brenda, how you doing, my friend?
I'm fine. How are you, Al?
I am well. And let me bring in Yusef Mgeni, who's been a friend for a whole adult lifetime and collaborator, partner, companion for a lifetime here in Twin Cities. Yusef, how you doing?
Very good. Thank you. Good afternoon, Al. Brenda.
Good to see you.
How are you, Yusef?
My knee is doing everything but gymnastics, but I'm hanging.
Milana isn't. She's at the physical therapist now. Al, Milana had the knee surgery too. So they've been comparing notes.
Okay. Well, good.
Tell her I feel like I've been rode hard and put up with.
Oh, she's so frustrated.
Well, let's bring in our colleague and friend from Bahia, Maestri Yoji Adewole Sena.
Good afternoon, brother.
Yoji, how you doing, man?
I'm doing okay.
Good. Let me introduce, I haven't done this before, but introduce you to a new person on our team, Lydia Graham. And you all talk to Vash Bodhi all the time, but let me ask Vash and Lydia both to come in to, number one, give props to Vash, to thank him publicly for the professionalism and the vision and the skill, the knowledge that he's brought to this production. Vash, let me say it to you, brother. Thank you for being here, for all you have done and are doing, and for what I think we're going to do that hopefully is innovative and massive in the future. Publicly, thank you so much.
Right on.
All right.
Good to be here with y'all.
And then you and I are going to introduce Lydia Graham. Lydia is a new member of our team starting this week, and she's going to be doing what you've been doing, and that is running the show. So she'll be the showrunner and also working with us in the social media space. Lydia, good afternoon and welcome. And let me introduce you to my friends, the companions. Why don't you come on screen, if you will, and Lydia, bring her on. There she is. Okay, so Lydia is in Connecticut and has got a phenomenal background in being a human being and in learning and being a self-motivated, self-starting learner. You'll hear from her over the time in the future, but I want to welcome you, Lydia, to the program, and thank you too.
Right on.
And Lydia's muted, but that's fine. So I see Angela is here. Angela, good afternoon. Welcome to the conversation. Good to see you.
Hello,
Angela.
Thank you for having me, as always.
I want to start and have two things in mind in general, but with Yusef. Yusef, you talked about a few minutes ago before airtime, the initiatives to discredit, to derail our state attorney general, who's up for election in a couple of weeks. Talk about where that energy is coming from. And I think I want that conversation about what's happening here in this country to also lead us into Brother Yogi's conversation about an election taking place right now. I think Saturday is the election for the new leadership in Brazil. It's important. And these things are tied together, I think. So let me first of all go to Brother Ndugu Yusef Mgeni. Yusef?
Thank you, Al. In fact, we're about, 12 days away from our elections here in the United States. And Brenda sent me an email last week. I'm remiss in being late in responding, but I will respond verbally today in terms of why African Americans should participate in the forthcoming elections. I remember my Muslim friends used to say one devil is as bad as the other, but in reality, I think that we are in a situation where not only democracy is at stake, but great harm to our physical, political, economic, religious, cultural, and spiritual presence as Black people is also at stake, not just here, but in Brazil as well. And there is a sister who is working with Angela's father over in the Wilkins Center at the Humphrey Institute. She's a fellow this year from Cartagena, Colombia, who has, and I have been discussing with her the situation of Afro-Colombians, and their vice president is the first Afro-Colombian to be elected in that country. However, the primary reason for African Americans to be involved in this forthcoming election is the extreme potential on the right to really derail many of the efforts that we and our forebears have worked for a number of generations. And I'll try and be as brief as possible. Let me know when I hit 5 minutes now, because
take your time. Take your time.
Miles Davis used to ask John Coltrane why I played so long, and Coltrane said, "I'm sorry, brother, it just took that long to get it all out." You know? And there is so much happening. We talked about the fact that more than 400 pieces of legislation had been entered in 48 state legislatures to suppress the votes of Black people in particular, people of color in general, and marginalized communities to boot. And these are extreme right-wing conservatives. An elected official in Arizona was calling for vigilantes to voluntarily show up at voting drop boxes with military equipment, bulletproof vests, AK-15s, and use their telephones to film people who were dropping off their ballots, film their license plate numbers, and then follow them home and film where they lived. It's crazy. There were two white fellows who were fined $5 million by the Federal Communications Commission for robocalls that they placed to tens of thousands of zip codes that were primarily African-American communities. They did Detroit, they did New York, They did Philadelphia, they did Chicago, they did Atlanta. And the robocall said, if you use early voting or mail-in voting, the man is going to get your information and the police are going to use it to see if you have any outstanding tickets or warrants. The credit card companies are going to use it to see if you owe them any money, and on and on and on. All these reasons why people shouldn't vote. And they claim to be a civil rights organization called 1599. And they're being charged with the Ku Klux Klan Act, the Voters' Rights Act, for violations of both, for felony fraudulent advertising, which brings us to the situation in Minnesota, where the people who financed the January 6th terrorist insurrection at the state capitol and who have funded a number of draconian right-wing initiatives have put more money into advertising against Keith Ellison than Keith Ellison's opponent has in his campaign. And this all goes back to the Supreme Court decision that allowed dark money or political action committees to do as much as they wanted and for people to give as much anonymously to these organizations. They've already spent more than $500,000 on ads that pretend to have an inmate in a Minnesota prison. And the operator says, this call is from a resident of a Minnesota corrections facility, and just tells all these racist lies about Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison. Supported cop killers, raised money for, criminals. And the ad concludes by saying, Keith Ellison is the criminal's choice in Minnesota for Attorney General. And my grandmother used to say, whenever somebody was accused of something and they were on TV, she'd say, well, the boy must be guilty, otherwise they wouldn't have charged him with all that. And I think there are many people who see something on TV, who read it on the internet, who hear it on the radio, and assume it's the gospel truth. And so these people are saying Keith Ellison is anti-cop, that he praised cop killers, that he supported defund the police. Let me tell you what these folks are doing in other areas of the country. What is Stacey's last name in Georgia, who's running for governor?
Abrams.
Stacey Abrams. They're showing pictures of her, and it was the same trick they used with Barack Obama, same trick they're using with Mandela Barnes in Wisconsin. Their complexion is 5 shades darker in the attack ads than it is in reality. So they're trying to paint these people to look like Willie Horton, same thing they did with him. It's just absolutely criminal what they are doing, folks, in terms of trying to suppress and intimidate and eliminate the votes of Black and other marginalized people in this country. So, and why should we be voting? What's this Graham boy's name, who has just been subpoenaed to testify in Georgia about the attempts to find 12,000? Lindsey Graham. What's this boy's name who is the system majority leader in the Senate? The one who refused to allow Barack Obama's nominee to even get a hearing, and sped through Amy Coney Barrett and this other beer drinking fella, in 30 days to get them on the Supreme Court and steal.
I can see the face. I can't think of the name.
I can't think. He was the House Speaker.
Not Mitch McConnell.
Senate.
Mitch McConnell.
Mitch McConnell, Lindsey Graham, Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio. And I want to say this, and then I want to shut up. I didn't see the high sign out, but I know I've talked longer than I should have. Of the 400 nominated Republicans who have been endorsed and are running for offices, for Senate, for state legislature, we're talking about statewide or national offices, or for the House of Representatives. 291 of them are election deniers, and 200 of them are in heavily Republican districts and likely to be elected to the House, to the Senate, to their state legislature. Okay. Now, we've got a handful of nutcases that, and I'm going to encourage Angela to talk about Alex Jones and this fool, Kanye West, and this, who is this other woman that he runs with, wearing these White Lives Matter T-shirts and saying slavery was a choice. And now
Marjorie.
Who?
Marjorie Taylor.
No, not
Candace Owens.
Candace Owens, another
Her.
Walmartian, anyhow. My point is that we have a handful of these nutcases, and this Marjorie Taylor, whatever her name is a classic example, who are election deniers and just crazies is what they are. Imagine if 291 of them are now endorsing legislation, are voting, and as close as it is, Hillary Trump won Minnesota by what, 1.5 percentage points?
Hillary Clinton.
Hillary Clinton. Who did I say? Hillary Trump. Hillary Trump. I'm sorry.
He's out there.
Hillary Clinton beat Trump, won over Trump. by 1.5 percentage points in Minnesota. So it's not like our vote doesn't make a difference. The African American community can decide who has the majority in the House and the Senate. If we were to turn out like we did for Barack Obama, it would be all over for these folks on the right, all over the country. More than 1 million people have voted in terms of mail-in votes and early voting already. The same thing is true in Georgia. It's true in Pennsylvania. It's true in New York. And those generally tend to be Democratic votes who vote early, because the Republicans have been encouraged not to trust mail-in voting, not to trust early voting, because their vote somehow magically would disappear and would become the vote of black people in prison or whatever. But 291 of those people are on the ballot. And if we don't show up and vote, I voted a month ago. If we don't show up and vote, then we don't deserve to raise any criticisms, constructive or otherwise, about what's in store for us. And Al, you talked about what's happening, what happened in the past and how it contributes to our future.
Mm-hmm.
Karenga calls it categories of possibility.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And we have those categories in front of us, and they are not negative or positive. They are going to be a direct result of what we as the African American community contribute to the outcome of these elections all over the planet. So given that, your vote is your voice. Okay. Either speak up or shut up, because if you shut up, it's going to be very painful if you don't vote. And the potential is more dangerous. And we've talked about dark money. We've talked about other books that speak to the efforts of the extremists on the right since the creation of the John Birch Society and Brown v. Board in 1954, how they put a 30-year plan in place to take over the Republican Party, to take over the House, the Senate, and the Supreme Court. And you know what? These folks are doing one heck of a job to achieve their potential. So let's make these categories of possibilities positive and life-inspiring. Otherwise, our children are going to put our generation in the trash can of history. Okay, and if we don't vote, we deserve it. So
awesome, Yusef. Wonderful.
Thank you.
No, thank you, brother. Let me, before I ask Angela to come in to build on, she's been putting wonderful notes in the private chat. I wonder if we're putting those on the front screen as well, but we should be sharing those to the public as well. But Yoji, why don't you take in here and sort of contextualize the election that's happening right now, this Sunday, I think, or Saturday, in Brazil. Same principles at play, and address them as you would.
Okay, yeah, the elections is next Sunday, and seems to be they're using the same tactics and strategies as in the U.S. The one having supposedly criminals expressing their support for Lula is also a technique that's used here.
Wow.
With the, here you have organized crime. They are national gangs, and they insist constantly with that. Brazil, the two things that happened this weekend. This last Sunday, there was the first attempt of disrupting the last week, where one ex congressman was ordered back into jail for distributing fake news, and he attacked violently and vilely one of the Supreme Court judges that is a woman, and that has caused a great uproar. And with that, he violated the order that allowed him to be in home detention. The electoral Supreme Court ordered him back to jail. So Sunday morning, the federal police, which is the equivalent of the FBI here, went to capture him, to take him to jail. And I mean, I'm sorry, that I'm laughing, but it's not a laughing matter. I have this sometimes histrionic laugh when I think things are very ridiculous. But so he first, the federal police went to reconduct him to jail, and he uh, released 3 grenades on the police that was trying to capture him, and also shot more than 50 shots of automatic rifle,
Wow.
which has been allowed to be in possession of common citizen with by the present president. And he was in a standoff with the police for 8 hours. They're doing all kind of negotiations. In certain ways, some people saying that was the right thing to do to avoid him. Probably that was the master plan. He was planning to become a martyr from the cause of freedom. That's what they use, and they use the same kind of blueprint at the United States. So there was avoided a violent confrontation with this criminal. At first, the president sent the Minister of Justice to go talk to him or dissuade him, and later he had to backtrack and start calling this ex-congressman as a bandit, as a criminal, because he resisted the police orders with gunfire, which is the same terminology that he used to the regular common criminals that is abundant here. And then yesterday or the day before, they tried to do a denouncement that supposedly the propaganda from Bolsonaro was not being broadcasted in the radio. So here, the candidates have free airtime according to the size of the party, and he tried to create the background to postpone the elections by doing this denunciation. But in fact, the court does not control sorry does not control the radios to enforce them to put or not the propaganda. But of course, the judge, the Supreme Court, demanded very fast that they produce, proof what the accusations, and of course there was none. So in this last week of the election, they are trying to really disrupt the election because the sense that they're gonna lose, it is very clear.
Take a minute, Yogi, if you would, just to draw a brief distinction between the Bolsonaro, the existing incumbent, and the candidacy of former president and challenger Lula. What do the two represent in the world of governance and politics?
Well, Lula is a historical union leader and boss. He was the leader of the metallurgical union that worked primarily in the manufacture of cars. And I think this is the 5th run for president. Lula lost the first 3, indeed got voted in. He represents more now than ever a center-left coalition in this election. So his candidate for vice president, it is a politician from São Paulo, historically from the PSDB, that are social democrats in Brazil. And he favors, policies that empower every downtrodden population in Brazil, be it LGBTQ plus, women, black women, black people, domestic employees, and during these his presidencies was the only time that Brazil was governed by somebody that does not belong to elites, and was the only time that Brazil came close to fulfill its full potential. You know, it was implemented policies also that are very similar to the ones that there are in the United States. So there is racial affirmative action and racial quotas, not only university, but for public employee functions. And during Lula presidency, Brazil became the sixth economy in the world, right? Which is something that never happened before. At the time, I was still living in the US, and every day you could hear mention the name of Brazil and the president, always with positive remarks. Bolsonaro, on the other hand, he is a ex-captain of the army that was invited to leave the army because he planned a mutiny, and he planned and almost did bomb Rio de Janeiro in the 80s for reivindications of military issues like better salaries and things like that. And that for that he was invited to leave the army in a certain way. As well, he was accused of stealing parachutes to manufacture backpacks. So this guy has been part of the Congress of Brazil for 23 or 27 years prior being elected president, and never has done any law that have any effect. He also has a family now, has three. He mentioned his kids by number, so he has number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4. That's kind of a military manner of being. He has 3 of his kids that are in politics already. 1 in the city hall of Rio, and 2. One is a senator now, and another is a federal deputy. And these people represent the right-wing white supremacist in Brazil that has been historically shy of showing itself and would put forward the idea that Brazil is a racial democracy, what has been, throughout the last 100 years, the official posture of Brazil in relationship to its racial reality, that here we have a racial democracy.
Let me bring Angela Rose in. Thank you for that primer again, Brother Yoji. And Angela, to give you a chance to make the connection, there's a global element here, and it's an element for the ages, I think, the time that we're in globally, the conservative versus the progressive. What are your thoughts?
I think
and
that
welcome to Dr. Irma. Dr. Irma, good to see you. Thank you for being here.
I think that we have, even since like 2016 and even before that, but like with the release of like the Pegasus documents, with the release of how social media has been manipulated by even like Russian bots and Chinese bots, we've seen over the past couple of years how misinformation has been utilized as a tool from foreign governments, and the impact on, and them impacting, governments like in the US and Europe and in Brazil. And one of the things I think about is how currently now the white supremacist candidates, right, are actively colluding with. And I think that's what the headline today is, with Jim Schultz, who is running for the Attorney General, actively colluding and coordinating with what is supposed to be independent actors to run ads attacking and spreading misinformation against the incumbent Keith Ellison. But we see this even with organizations these days too. The Minnesota Freedom Fund is an organization that posts the bail for folks in Hennepin County. And over the last 2 years, they have faced a lot of misinformation about what they do. The NAACP, we face a lot of misinformation every couple of weeks, months, specifically right before an election. They'll go out a social media post that says, the NAACP has found credible threats of, the KKK in your neighborhood, taking Black men, right? So I'll see that social media post about once every couple of months on Twitter or on Facebook, and it spreads a lot of fear and a lot of misinformation. But also it works to discredit the legitimacy of the real threats that we see, right? And we are in a state of emergency, Black people as a whole. Even if you look at what's happening in Haiti, there are governments that are actively being destabilized, right? And there's active need for information to focus on the needs of Black people in Haiti and in Eritrea, in different parts of the world. But yet we are being inundated with misinformation, right? So there is a real need for us to look and to see and to engage with the real information of the human rights crises that are happening around the world. And yet, instead of that, we are being inundated with lies left and right.
Irma is here. Won't you, if you're set, come on in, Irma, and join the conversation. Or as she's getting set up, Brenda, thoughts, comments?
Oh, I just wanted to say it's happening in New Mexico with a 3% population of African Americans and people of color, and they are dumping tons of money in New Mexico, the GOP. And, when I think of Attorney General Keith Ellison, and I would like to ask where Minneapolis would be had that team not performed in the way they did with the case against Chauvin. They would have torn that city apart if that man had not been charged with the murder of George Floyd. So right now, Michelle Lujan Grisham is neck and neck with a weatherman. And it's all because of the money that the GOP is putting in. I don't get it. I just don't. But it's ruthless. They've got trucks that they're following all around the United States. They're jumping in trucks with guns and maps and whatever, going to the polling stations. And now they don't have enough posters because people are afraid. It's ugly. And we've got to step up. We just have to. And I don't know what the headlines would be, but it's kind of scary. That's all I can say.
Irma, jump in.
I'm talking to my uncle who fought in Vietnam and lived overseas for a while fighting for this country, and he is very disturbed by the misinformation that is out there and what he sees as a threat to democracy. I think the only difference is that now this is overt action. This is nothing new. We saw this post-Reconstruction. We saw this before, voting rights, before the Voting Rights Acts, the intimidation of threats. I think the difference is that those who are perpetuating this are being very overt about it. They're not trying to do it surreptitiously. It's part of their agenda to spread this. And I think we just have to keep newspapers like Insight News and these conversations going And we have to encourage, I mean, I think we now need to get to the schools to encourage students to think critically, to read more than what's on Twitter or what's on, Instagram or what's on TikTok, to pick up some books and start getting more information. And maybe it's time to resurrect what we used to call the New Africa schools, the schools where kids after school would get information that was not given to them in schools. I just think we're at a critical moment in terms of the survival of this democracy. Whatever its faults, it's better than where this country seems to be going with these followers of Trump who are not interested in facts. They're interested in creating their own propaganda.
Good point. Thank you. Angela, a couple of comments you're making in the side chat here. Go ahead and share those.
My just direct response to Miss Brenda is, when folks can't make an argument validly on why others should vote for them, they lie, right? And so that's the argument 101. If you can't make an argument, you go on an ad hominem attack, if it's the truth or not.
And Obama would know that for sure.
Exactly.
Both of them, really.
Exactly.
And I'd like to write on Dr. Irma. We need to get to the college campuses. We, a friend of mine just came back from one of the HBCs in Alabama, and he said they have, rallies and everything. They are doing some things with the HBCs, but we really do need to get to them because the youth are going to make, the millenniums, they're going to make a difference.
We need to get to social media too, Brenda.
Yeah, that's
where
for sure.
the kids are.
It's Gen Z now. Millennials are,
what
40s,
is it now?
Gen Z.
Oh, that's
Millennials
right.
are
I
in
just
our
wrote about
40s
Kenya,
to
and that's
mid-late
what
20s.
she called herself.
My granddaughter's in the other room, and when we want her, we have to text her.
Yes. And, Al, we had talked about this some years ago about creating boot camps and connecting the Black press to HBCUs. I think we have to, I'm a member of an alumni of the Op-Ed Project, and they are very strategically getting people to become, they say right to change the world. I think the kind of programs that used to be in place in North Minneapolis, in fact, where students were being trained as journalists in high schools, teaching them how to think critically, how to write critically. I think we have to go back to those kinds of basics.
What was the name of the project, Dr. Irma?
The Op-Ed Project was founded originally to increase the number of women writing op-eds and editorials. Because at the time it was founded by Katie Orestein, and I was at Ford Foundation back in 2005, 2006. She was on Katie Couric and documented that 85% of all the op-eds and editorials were written by white men. And so her goal was to get in more women. She's turned that into an effort to increase the presence of non-white and marginalized populations. And I served as a mentor editor for that. Ms. Magazine has done workshops to increase the number of feminist writers, academics translating their writing into public writing. And I think it's time for the NNPA to also do the same thing, to launch something that is really about creating citizen journalists, teaching students from high school and even younger how to think critically for themselves and not just be misdirected.
I think that's something we can do from this space. I think it's a good idea. We've talked about this for a long time, Dr. Irma, and I think that what we've done as a company in our relationships with each other is move down that path. So maybe what we ought to be doing is figuring out how do we actualize the opportunity, figuring out what it takes to make it happen, and create a test case or a proof of concept that we can use to engage young people and technology properly, differently. I want to ask if anybody watched the Netflix video produced by the Obamas, I think their company, called Descendants. Anybody see that in the past week? It's playing on Netflix. Way
I'm
back
going
when.
to be writing about it because I'm actually sitting here in Mobile, Alabama.
Uh-huh.
And one of the people involved in it is at the University of South Alabama. So I just text him to see if he would be interested in being interviewed around it. And I plan to watch it tonight.
Well, bring him on this program with you sometime too after you've done the interviews. But this is an author that you're familiar with. You're a scholar of Zora Neale Hurston, among others. This book, Barracoon, talks about the last slave ship that brought enslaved Africans into
Mobile.
North America, to Mobile,
Yeah.
and the creation of a town called Africa Town. And
Mhm.
Zora Neale, the pioneering anthropologist that she was, researcher that she was, documented the story of Cujo, right? And it's a fascinating story. I'm familiar with it in part because this is one of the topics discussed in the
Narrative.
in Narrative and Nubia in the programs sponsored by Dr. Greg Carr. But it's really worth watching the video on Netflix and having a conversation about this whole process. Because what I loved about watching the show was they raised the question about the revenue streams associated with that illegal act of enslaving and selling, trafficking human beings.
Sure.
And the fact that the families that were at the center of this particular set of transactions are still there, and they are massive landowners, and they're responsible for leasing the land that they have to a number of industrial players like International Paper and others who are creating companies that are polluting the community and causing an abnormal presence and rate of cancer in Black people. And on top of that, as these people, the descendants of Cujo, decided to plant their feet and not try to return to Africa. They wanted to return, but couldn't. But after the war was over and slavery was formally ended, they decided in a conscious way to create their own community in town, and did that in a way that was prosperous. But that in itself, like so many communities around the country, like Rondo, like North Minneapolis, was also a victim of removal through highway policy. So two things here. One is the ongoing initiative to destroy what Black people have created, despite all of the odds, in our effort to find freedom, sustainability, and a future. But the second part is accountability. And the question must be raised. All of the land, all the profits, all of the assets, and all of the cost to other human life and health associated with the use of that land, which was acquired directly from the proceeds of the enslavement of human beings. You know, one of the items in the article was that people were saying, well, you know, the guy that owned the ship, Mayer was his name, I think, dead and gone, can't prosecute him criminally. But a judge in Mobile said, well, but there's also civil litigation. And we should look to a civil strategy of setting the record straight, of reckoning, of repairing the damage. Anybody got any thoughts on that? Irma, why don't you jump in first?
Right. First, I think it's important for people to understand that the flotilla, which is the ship, is now in the National Museum. It was sunk in the Mobile Bay because this effort of bringing enslaved people was illegal. Slavery had ended. This was a bet. And the fact that we're just now hearing about it. So, for example, Zora wrote that book about Barracoon over 100 years ago. I saw letters and between her and Langston Hughes about her finding Cujo. And I think what has happened is that it's being resurrected so that now we're talking about reparations. We have a number of academic institutions that acknowledge that their wealth was based on, you know, selling of human beings as property. And so I think there are lots of cases to be made for them to get, you know, compensation and all of that.
Georgetown was recent, right? I think that was the last one that yeah.
And there's a whole cadre of academic institutions that now are part of a consortium to sort of make good and make amends for what happened in the past, because they would not exist had they not sold these enslaved people, not to mention use their labor to build the buildings that many of these institutions have.
Just a reminder, Till is coming out tomorrow. And I saw Whoopi this morning talking about it. And evidently it is the woman that plays Mamie is absolutely powerful.
It's a powerful story.
Huh?
It's a powerful story.
Well,
the
you know, we
family.
always know that. Al and I both got in trouble for finding that Jet magazine when we weren't supposed to be looking at the picture.
I would just highlight for folks to see Till, and that the family of Emmett Till still is around. There is a portion that lives in Minnesota, and they have strongly advocated for this story to be made. And also the documentary of what happened to Emmett Till by Keith Beauchamp. That was in the early 2000s. They were a part of that as well. And Keith Beauchamp had a hand in giving the historical accuracy for this film as well. So there's a legacy of this film that is tied to what the family is doing, and they're actively also trying to get Carolyn, the white woman who
What is she, 87, Angela?
Yes.
Yeah.
Trying to
Carol-
still get
Carol
find
Bryant.
accountability. Yeah, Carol Bryant.
Yeah.
To get accountability for her lies against Emmett Till. So
Well,
they're still
they found
working
an
for
old
justice.
arrest warrant. They found an old arrest warrant in the basement of the courthouse for her that had never been executed shortly after Emmett Till's murder.
And that was
they went to court, and
mysterious.
the judge found, well, you know, it's so old, there's no sense in proceeding. So they dismissed it.
That was
So I just wanted to
mysterious,
highlight
the
that.
way it came out of the boxes, though. You know, they had all of these boxes in the basement, and it was like, what is Deborah's last name, Al?
Watts. It's
Deborah Watts.
yeah.
Watts.
Yeah,
Deborah Watts.
and she described it where she said they were just drawn to this one box, and right there, sort of like in the front, these documents came up.
I think it's just
Unbelievable.
crucial because like our stories are often told by others, right?
Yeah.
And
Not too much now. We're rising. We're telling these stories, and I'm so proud of everyone because I remember I started writing children's books when I was like 10 with multicultural characters. It wasn't time. It's time now.
But even like connecting to Barracoon, right? The having the words, reading the words of Zora Neale Hurston, and you know, her transcriptions of what Cujo was saying is so important. And then there you have even folks like Olada Equano,
Yes.
the slave. He wrote his own story. There's a lot of slave autobiographies that I encourage people to see. I know that there is a trend right now where there's a lot of young people my age who don't want to see slave narratives, right? But what you see on screen, 12 Years a Slave is not a slave narrative. A slave narrative is the words of our people who wrote it down, you know? So not just the depictions of our people, but the actual words.
Angela Gordon Parks made that movie 20 years ago that became 12 Years a Slave. And unfortunately, he did not get any credit for doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Angela, you've got
that
Haiti.
and Leadbelly were both
Haiti.
outstanding.
Haiti's on your mind, Angela. What do you thoughts about Haiti? And Yoji, we've talked about Haiti. What's going on in Haiti right now? And I think we'd like to bring some experts on Haiti into the conversation. But what's on your mind right now about Haiti?
Yes, no, I'm really concerned about what's happening in Haiti. As most folks know, it's destabilized right now, and there are, a lot of, they say gang activity, right? Some politically motivated, some just individuals and groups, inflicting terror. And what I am still wondering about, and I'm still trying to connect, is how the U.S. and other government entities interact with, Haiti. So right now, the U.S. does want to send in, some resources, and they said that it's been successful. The assistant secretary, the assistant defense secretary had said that sending in resources has been pretty successful to send to Port-au-Prince, but the port in and of itself has been under control of gang influence. And so I'm still trying to work out how not to be a neoliberal, force, a U.S. comes in, force, but how we can really support the Haitians, even though they've gone through the assassination of their former president and now have an interim president, currently prime minister, currently, that is not as supported in a way, I'll say.
Angela, I would encourage people to read The Black Jacobins by C.L.R. James, and also Haiti, An Unending Agony by Randall Robinson, which is an incredible history of Haiti, the reparations that Haiti had to pay France, and the interest to major financial institutions, including those in the United States. And after the Haitian Revolution, a lot of the French plantation owners transferred to the United States, where slavery was still legal, and continued the practice of breeding slaves. So, that the poverty and the misery in Haiti is not accidental or coincidental, and it's clearly the product of interference in their destiny from from France, from the United Kingdom, from the United States, and other countries. And Randall Robinson's book just laid it all bare. Unbelievably accurate.
Yoji, how does it look from South America when you look and think about what's happening in Haiti? And Brazil was one of the countries that was involved in some of the previous efforts to bring stability to Haiti. And I think you and I talked briefly about mixed results of that. On the one hand, maybe some order, but on the other hand, there was a continued consequence that was negative for certain parts of the population with the Brazilian-led peacekeeping or restorative force. Talk about what you know about Haiti and how it looks to our people from South America, from where you stand anyway. Unmute.
I was reading this morning about Haiti, and so as far as I am understanding, the U.S. are urging several countries to send. They take the leadership into the supposed help to stabilize Haiti, but the United States is reluctant to put boots on the ground, and they're expecting other countries to do so. So paradoxically, Brazil, that is right now under a right-wing government, has refused to take part of it. As well, Canada, France, they are trying to also resort now to certain kind of community of Caribbean countries, meaning Jamaica, Barbados, Grenadines. These small countries send troops into the ground with the United States providing material support. So nobody is kind of volunteering to go to send the troops in, because it has been proven to be a very volatile situation. Now, right now, also, not only Haiti is under the grip of the gangs for the last 7 weeks. There is a cholera epidemic raging on. That the previous one also was caused by the Nepalese soldiers of that United States military mission that was under the Brazilian command. So many of Haitians has migrated to Brazil, and here they have suffered such levels of racism here, because generally they are darker hue, or because have mixed less than black people here, and they are really it's like the weakest of the time to be discriminated. Right now in Brazil also there is a immigration of Africans that are fleeing the economic situations in Africa. They are coming to Brazil, and I believe that the Brazilian government, that even being a one that favors military interventions, they are refusing to go and take again leadership role in Haiti, because it also offends the white supremacism of the present government. So they won't send troops to a black country, a country that is governed by black people.
Wow.
So the United States is kind of, struggling. They are offering all the material support, but themselves don't want to send troops. Seems that Canada, who will do it eventually, they already send many vehicles to the police to shore up, the police force in Haiti and to repress the gang members. But Haiti has been like this since its independence. As you guys mentioned earlier, has a steep reparation bill with France that still today is being enforced. During all the liberation wars here from colonial powers in the 19th century, Haiti was the boogeyman to the elites in South America, particularly in Brazil. They are very afraid that something that like happened in Haiti would happen here in Brazil, and that was the reason that slavery here it took so long to be abolished. Brazil was the last one, and before Brazil was Cuba, that they abolished slavery around the decade of 1880s. So Haiti, unfortunately, I don't see any immediate solution or any medium term, also bright horizon coming to them, because there is several factors that keep them down.
Yoji, what's the population of Afro-Brazilians today?
Well, the total population of Brazil in the last census was 210, and 54% of that population declared to be black and pardo.
That's more than 100 million.
Yeah.
More than 100 million.
Yeah, 120 kind of. But here the lump, here, for example, in my ID, I'm pardo. My race is pardo. Pardo, I think will translate to pard. It's
biracial?
No, it's pardo. It's something that during the sundown, sun up, you cannot distinguish the color. So it's a confusion given by the light, which is not a color in definition. It's not one of the chrome colors, and it's not also a race. So it's something very Brazilian, where they lump anybody that doesn't look European into pardo. So in that case, Indians are pardos also.
Listen, we're out of time, but I want to leave with a couple of thoughts, questions that I'll raise. And Irma, maybe you'll think about this, and everybody. I wonder why we characterize the energy on the street. We're encouraged to see it completely as lawlessness, activity of thugs and gangs. But when we look at Nicaragua or look at Colombia, we see activity of young people with different names. We call them paramilitar or insurrectionist. And maybe it's a reflection of the level of organization, the level of structure or the lack of structure. But I raised the question, and I wonder how much what we see and say and believe as a potential in Haiti and elsewhere has to do with our assessment of what people are capable of. And if we continue to define them as thugs, as miscreants, as incapable, then we will always respond to them that way, in a way that suppresses what may be emerging in them and of them as a will to freedom and for self-reliance, self-determination. And I put that too, as I'm saying that, I'm thinking about the interviews I've done with Vice President and Vice Commander Riek Machar, who was one of the leaders of the South Sudanese People's Liberation Army and of the SPLM. And he talked about the relationship that he and other grown men had when they left Khartoum, left the university, and went to the bush to wage a 20-year war against the Sudanese government, South Sudan Sudanese. And part of that process included inducting child warriors, young people. So I'm going to leave it there. I'm trying to see what the similarities are, what the connection is between young people conscripted or volunteering or self-organizing, self-mobilizing to do either what we can call petty crime or criminal or neighborhood, crime, gang work, versus when do you see things emerging defined as the work of liberation or the work of resistance? I don't know the answers. I'm throwing it out. With that, I'm going to say goodbye to everybody. Think about it, and let's come back to that conversation next time we talk. I'm Al McFarlane. This is The Conversation. We'll see you next time.
Stay safe.
Number 13.